Hey everyone, welcome back to the Going Scared podcast. This is your host, Jessica Honegger, founder of the social impact fashion brand Noonday Collection. Are you ready for honest and vulnerable conversations that will inspire you towards action? Join me here every week for conversations on living lives of purpose by leaving comfort and going scared. Today's guest for you is a treat. His name is Simon Bailey. I met him at a conference that I spoke at, and I was just struck by how I experienced him. I think a lot of motivational speakers can really be amped and fire people up, which is awesome, but he had a true, genuine spirit about him. I could tell that love is his fuel. He calls himself a breakthrough strategist, and his life purpose is to teach 1 billion plus people how to be fearless and create their futures. He's the author of 9 books, and his business building relationships course for LinkedIn Learning has been viewed by over 750,000 professionals. He's been named as one of the top 25 people who will help you reach your business and life goals by Success Magazine. And honestly, you're going to have to put your seatbelt on for this one. There are so many one-liners in this podcast that I could just chew on and chew on and chew on. And I wanted to have him on because I've been thinking so much about attitude. I've been thinking about how you can have the best strategy and you can have all the right tactics, but if you don't have the right attitude, that could be what is blocking your breakthrough. I firmly believe that, and that is what a lot of our conversation is about. But we also got vulnerable where he shared more about his divorce and the man he could have been in order to avoid that divorce. It's a rich conversation. Like I said, we cover a lot of ground in this one. You're going to want to get out your pen and paper. By the way, if you valued this conversation, could you go leave a review on iTunes? I know I ask you that almost every week now that we have our new season, but it really does help more people find the show. So if you could go share it wherever you hang out on social, and if you could just give it a review. It takes like 5 seconds. Even if you don't want to leave a review, you can just click the little stars, give it a rating. More and more people will find us that way, and I deeply, deeply appreciate it. All right, here is our conversation. A lot of us, our moms, our kids are back in school. We're out there, we're hitting the pavement with our businesses. You know, it's kind of that new season, and we're kind of in that starting season right now. And so I want to talk about how can we end well, and how can we really approach our businesses and our life with the right attitudes.
Yeah, it's so amazing and almost serendipitous that we would have this conversation. So I want to start with a story. This morning, I was driven to school by my 17-year-old daughter. She just got her learner's permit, and she said, "Dad, I want to drive to school." And I said, "Okay." It's just I want to pull in the senior parking lot. She's a senior, and I said, "Okay." And I was a bit nervous, but I said, "You know what? We're going to go for it." And she says, "Mom lets me drive her car all the time." So, not to be outdone, absolutely, baby girl, you can do it. And it's about a 20-minute drive. And halfway through the drive, Jessica, she says to me, "How am I doing so far?" And it wasn't so much the question of how am I doing so far? The question behind the question is, "Dad, do you see me?" And I want the validation that I'm doing good. That was the deeper part. So when I heard her, I said, "Babe girl, you're doing awesome." And we got there unscathed. Everything was fine. And I got out of the car, and she got out of the car and got her backpack. And this is in the senior parking lot. And my 17-year-old daughter gives me a hug. I give her a kiss on the forehead, and I say, "Have a great day." What I recognize is so many times when it comes to attitude, we don't answer the question truly, how am I doing so far? And we go down the side of the road and we focus on everything that's not working, what didn't come through. And the story becomes more powerful than the successes and wins that we've had. So, for everyone that is listening to us, I invite you to, first of all, call just a timeout and evaluate, how are you doing so far? And I want you to intentionally focus on what is going right. What has given you the win? What has pushed you over the edge? What has allowed you to succeed? And I want you to celebrate in that, because guess what? There are going to be negative things that's happened. That's life. But I assure you, if we focus on the wins and the successes, it will literally give us the kickstart from the inside out to continue to move forward.
I am curious. You have such an interesting career path. So I'd love for you to, first of all, just share a little bit more about your own career path. And then I'd love for you to share a time when attitude really did make the difference for you.
Sure. So when I was in high school, I went to high school in Buffalo, New York, McKinley High School. And my freshman year, I went out for the football team. I got cut. Went out for the basketball team. They said, "You are not the next Magic Johnson." And I got cut. And I went out for track and field, and they said, "You're too slow. You need to run cross country." I mean, do you feel my pain already, right?
I feel it. I feel it. I feel your teenage insecurity.
And in Texas, they would say, "Bless his heart," right? And
That's right.
so my parents decided to transfer me to another school. And it was at that school I met my English teacher, Miss Rita Lankus, and she said to me, "Young man, I want you to write a speech and give it before the entire school." Miss Lankus saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And 35 years later, I am living out and I have seen the harvest of that seed that was planted by a teacher. And every single time that I have fear or I'm not sure, I go back to that moment in time where someone believed in me, but they needed me to believe that they believed in me. So my belief had to kick in. And when my belief kicked in, it was like, whoa, amazing. So fast forwarding to, how did I come to this point in life right now? So I was working at Disney, and I decided that I had reached a place at Disney where it was time for me. So I cashed in my entire 401k with significant Disney stock, took out a line of credit on the house. At the
And
time,
where are you at in life right now?
I was
Family, what's going on in your life?
34. Daniel was 20. He was actually 4 years old, and Madison was 18 months. So, and their mother didn't work outside the home, and we had just bought our first house, so there was no plan B. All right. And we launched when the country was going to war with Iraq for the second time, and corporations were laying off by the hundreds of thousands. And we said, okay, if we're going to do this entrepreneurial thing, we've got about a 3 year runway to make this work. 3 years of savings. And if it doesn't work, I got to go back to Disney and say, "Please, Mickey Mouse, give me my job back. I need to work." So I literally launch out, and what I recognize every single day, and this is something my father taught me, the best hand that will feed you is the one at the end of your wrist. So I made a list of 75 people that I had met over 15 years, and I just start calling them and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing now. I'm speaking, I'm coaching, I'm training, I'm consulting." I hadn't even written a book then. And I didn't make it past the 25th name until I start getting calls back. And literally within 18 months, many would have thought we would have been out of business and certainly in the red. We were in the black. But what I recognize is I had to get up every single day with the attitude that nobody is going to do this for me. We have to do it. We have to make it happen. And that's what we did.
So when you look back at your career at Disney, because I don't want the listener to have this narrative that this high school teacher was like, you're going to be a speaker, and then there was this linear line, like it just became clear, like this is my passion, this is my impact. Because I think a lot of us even are still wondering, even me, which I know that's bizarre because I'm the CEO of a successful company, but I still sometimes am asking myself the question, perhaps that's because I'm a typical entrepreneur who's kind of good at a lot of things, but not necessarily a real master at any of them. I think, what what am I good at? In fact, I had a conversation with the CEO over the weekend, and she's a CEO over about $100 million company. And I was just getting
Mhm,
some mentorship from her. And she said, she's ahead of me in years and in experience. And she said, when I was around where you're at, about 9 years in, I remember making a list of all the things that got me to where I was. Like, how did I get success? What was I good at? Where was I spending my time in those first couple of years of building? And then I just did that again. I just started doing more of that. And so I'm kind of in that place of like, where do I spend, what are those things that I know I'm really good at? And so I think a lot of us have honestly a hard
mhm,
time answering that question. We feel a little bit unsure where, this high school teacher, it took
mhm,
almost someone else seeing it in
mhm.
you for you to see it in yourself. So if we're in that place a little bit of like a little unsure of identifying those things, what are some of the things we can do to kind of get more clarity?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to four questions that we have to answer. Question number one, where have I been? And that question looks at where have I been? How did I get to this point? Why did I make this decision? What has allowed me to succeed? Question number two, why am I here? So, the why am I here question, which is the age old question that thousands of philosophers for thousands of years have been asking. But the why am I here question anchors you that I'm where I'm supposed to be right now, right? And then that third question, which is probably the most important question, what can I do? Now, let me tell you why the what can I do question is so important. Dr. Christian Mirsky, who is a psychologist at Princeton University, says in his research when the brain is worried because of uncertainty, the brain slows down. When the brain slows down, it doesn't create neurogenesis, which is the process of growing neurons, which grows the brain. So if the brain slows down because of worry, worry has a BFF called stress, and stress has a first cousin called fear. And when stress, fear, and worry get on the same page, we kind of slow down and we skew towards the negative side and the story of what's not happening. And that becomes bigger than the possibility of what can happen. So the what can I do question becomes the control alt delete question that deletes from our mind drive and our heart drive those things that prevent us from breaking through and having just a breakout experience. And then the fourth question is, where am I going? So when I put those four questions together, where have I been? Why am I here? What can I do? And where I'm going, what you discover is that it's not who you are that holds you back, it's who you think you're not that holds you back. And are you going to invest time, energy, and brilliance in who you think you're not? Or are you going to invest time, energy, and who you think you are becoming? And making that shift literally allows you to break through.
I mean, it really does. It really does. And I would like to offer that sometimes I would say you might have different answers in different seasons to those questions. Like the new mom who might be staying at home for a little bit might be asking that anew in a new way than maybe she did when she was career, or maybe the gal who thought she would be married by now but she's single is asking that in a different way than maybe she did in college. What would you say about that?
What I would simply say, God would never put you in a place where you do not have the capacity to achieve something. God believes in you. He's just waiting for you to believe that He believes in you and that whatever season you might be in right now, that you have the capacity and the ability to literally create the future. And creating the future is being
Mm.
present to the moment to understand that your best days are in front of you.
Tell me a little more about, I know you gave the high school example, but when in your career, when you kind of broke out on your own and you're calling 25 people, and I know it wasn't just like that people started calling back and it's been unicorns and rainbows ever since. Um, yeah, tell us a little bit about how your attitude has helped you be resilient during a challenging time in your career.
Yeah, probably one of the most challenging times in my career is when I submitted a video to the $1 Million Roundtable, which in the financial and insurance space, to be on their stage in front of all of their customers, 10,000 people from 72 nations, is a really, really big deal. And I had submitted a videotape to be on their stage along with almost 1,000 other men and women in this space. And for 9 years straight, I was rejected. 9 years straight. And what I recognized,
Mm.
I just gave up. I just absolutely gave up. And I asked for feedback. And they said to me, they said, yes, we did receive your information, but you're a nice guy, but you're not that good. And to receive that direct feedback was very humbling because, up until that time, I thought, I was the creme de la creme. So instead of going negative and say, well, you guys just don't appreciate me, I decided to invest in a coach. I decided to invest in not just one coach, but two coaches. And I am forever grateful for the two coaches that came alongside me. And one lady, her name was Sam, the other lady was Susan. And what they helped me understand is sometimes you can't see the frame when you're in the picture. And they invited me to let go of what wasn't working and to let come what wanted to emerge. So they begin to specifically help shape my content, my style, how I was showing up. And they said, here's the deal. You have to be you. You cannot be anyone else but you. And the reason you were rejected for 9 years is because John Mason, in his book called An Enemy Called Average, says most people are born originals but die copies. And literally, when I made that shift, the 10th year, I submitted the video and was accepted out of almost 800 people that they vetted to be their number one person to open up in front of 9,000 people from 72 nations in Toronto, Canada. And what I recognized, I came to that place where I had to stop beating myself up because they didn't say yes to me. And I needed to go really and do the deeper work to say, is there a problem? And am I willing to acknowledge that my attitude absolutely is negative about what they're saying and now be open? What do I need to do to get better?
I love that a lot of your turnaround came from receiving feedback. I think that when we are in a negative space, and I mean, this has been a journey I've been on the last couple of years because I did my first 360 feedback
Mm,
from stakeholders in my life around probably it was a year and
mhm,
a half ago, 2 years at this point. And I remember being so afraid going to my executive coach. It was the first time I'd ever hired as an executive coach. And I was so
mm,
afraid to get this feedback. And even when I describe it to people, they cringe, and I've talked about it quite a bit on this podcast when I first was going through it. And it was kind of ironic the day that I actually had the day I received the feedback. And then the next day I had an interview for this podcast with a
wow.
self-compassion expert.
Wow.
That was no
Wow.
accident. Thank you, God, for that one. And actually receiving the feedback and then combining that with this self-compassion expert. Her name's Dr. Kristen Neff. Brene Brown has used her research quite a bit in all of her work. And I realized that it's because I hadn't been compassionate with myself, or I didn't know how to get in touch with that compassionate voice. And so I was
Mm,
afraid of feedback. And so I began to change that narrative and
mm,
see feedback as a gift. And one of the pieces of feedback that I got is that I don't like receiving feedback.
right. Exactly. And what you just described is when a person evolves in their personhood and they experience that personal evolution, they understand number one, how do I own it? Number two, how do I create it? And number three, how do I love it? So owning it is hearing the truth that literally makes you free. How do I now create the next step? What am I going to execute within the next 24 hours to act upon what I've heard? And then how am I going to love it for who I am becoming in the process?
Let's go back to this. How can I own it? I actually have a whole chapter in my book called Owning Your Worth.
Hmm.
And I do find a lot with women, which I work with a lot of women, that is almost the first obstacle is people are not necessarily willing to own what they have to give. They are focused more on either what they don't have or they just feel a lack of clarity. Um, so
Mhm.
let's dive me a little bit deeper into that step number 1 because I have a feeling that that's probably a chapter in one of your books too.
So, what I've discovered when I have interviewed and studied high performing female entrepreneurs, one of the things that they have this uncanny ability to do is to be gut honest real with the state of their world. And when they are gut honest real, they're not pointing the finger at anyone else. They have
Mm,
the ability to admit their mistakes, but understanding just because you make a mistake, that does not mean you are a mistake. Just because you fail, it does not mean you're a failure. So they have the ability to reframe it as a teachable moment. All right, that's the first thing that I've discovered. The second thing I've discovered is when you really own, and I hate to use the word stuff, but when you own where you are, all of a sudden you stop saying, I can't, and you start saying, I can. You stop saying no and you start saying yes. Research says that by the time a child is 17 years of age, they have only heard, or they have heard only, they've heard no 150,000 times and only yes 5,000 times. So the ability to find the yes when it looks like a no starts with that individual, right? And then the third thing that I've discovered is they surround themselves or create what I would call a surround sound of men and women who will give them a perspective that doesn't necessarily agree with making them look good or right. Now, some would call that critical feedback. But what it does is it allows you to hear from someone else who sees you from just a different angle. And then you have the ability to say, do I agree or do I disagree? Are they projecting or are they giving me something that's going to help me become better? We've often heard people don't see you as you are, they see you as they are. So, in receiving that feedback from people that are trusted advisors, your core group, your posse, your squad, how open am I to the feedback that I don't necessarily agree with? Could be the very thing that I need to embrace for who I become in the process.
mm. I mean, imagine even just if we sat down with our spouses, for those of us that are married, and said, "Hey, what could I do better this school year to just support you?" I mean, we never do that, right?
So yeah, yeah. You know what? So can I just share with you a failure story? So a part of why I went through a divorce after being married for
Yeah.
25 years is because I wasn't really willing to own how I was showing up in the house, and I was emotionally unavailable. So she said to me one day, the mother of my children, who we were married for 25 years, she said, "You give everybody the best of you, but you give us the rest of you, and I don't want the leftovers anymore." And what I discovered, I wasn't willing to own it because I was like, "Oh, you're just trying to tell me that I'm, not doing it right, and that's all you do as a wife. You
Mm,
beat me up, wah, 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 wah." But the truth of the matter is, I wouldn't own that I needed to be home and fully engaged in the house, not just to be an empty suit wanting to watch ESPN. So after not owning my stuff, I built a house but
mm,
lost a home, made money but had no meaning, and was pursuing power but had no purpose. And I didn't keep the main thing, because I wouldn't own my stuff. And here's the reality: I started to go to a counselor by the name of Anita, and Anita, who has more degrees than a thermometer, has been doing therapy for 40 years. And she said to me, whatever you don't deal with and take ownership of will eventually deal with you and will show up in other areas. And that was my wake up call, where I was being
mhm.
invited to let go of who I thought I was, to really embrace that, you know what, you seem to be a better dad. And you could have been a better husband if you owned it.
Wow. And would you say then that that journey of transformation, like that set you on a journey of transformation?
Oh my goodness. It has made me so emotionally available to Madison. And their mother and I get along really well. We were great co parents. But what I recognize, what could have saved the marriage is if I stop hearing and listening, because we all hear through filters. So
Mm.
when she was talking, I was hearing what I thought she was saying, which was like a personal attack. Instead of listening, see, the same letters that spell the word listen spell the word silent. So if I would have listened to what was behind what she was saying, it was really the invitation. We want to make this marriage work. We want to save it, but I need you to get this. And because I was just being ultra masculine and testosterone, and I'm right, you're wrong, right? My ego, edging greatness out, got in the way and caused us to divorce because I didn't own it. But it's made me a better person because now when a Madison would say to me, Dad, so how am I doing so far? I can hear the deeper part. I need to affirm my daughter in this moment to say, you're doing great, baby girl.
Mm. And gosh, I feel like the dynamic that you described is such a prolific dynamic in marriage between men and women. I think a woman's like, I need
Hmm.
you to be more
Hmm.
available. The guy feels so easily criticized. Oftentimes, men just, what would you say to a woman who might be in this exact marriage dynamic right now? What would you say to her?
Wow. Oh my goodness. There's so many things I can say, but
Because I know what you'd say to the
here's
dude, but most of my listeners are women.
here's what I'd say to ladies, just real talk. Men, our ego is so paper thin. I mean, you could just blow us over like with the wind if you say something that's critical. But here's the first thing. Um, First of all, how is your husband wired? Is he a visual learner, auditory, hands-on? And if you want to get through to him, describe it in the way that he learns it and gets it, and be mindful of tone, and when you're talking, slow down the rate of your speed and affirm him to say, here's what I appreciate about you, right? It's almost like that emotional deposit into the emotional bank account, as Dr. Stephen Covey taught us years ago, right? And so now, okay, you affirmed me. And oh, by the way, here's an observation. And it's all in language because language is the software of the mind. So when you have affirmed me and say, here's an observation that I've made, and I'd like to help you think about, do you want me to see you that way? And what you're doing, ladies, you're doing reverse psychology because you're not telling us we're wrong, but you're asking what you would like for us to do in the form of a question. And that question causes us as a man to think, to say, she just said, I
Mm.
wonder. And then here's what he's going to do. He's going to go and talk to his boys. He's not going to talk to you in that moment because he's going to just like, yep, 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 I hear you. He's just going to give you the screensaver face that he got it because he wants you to shut up. But he's going to be thinking, she put this question on my mind. And you know what? Let me ask Charlie, hey, my wife said to me, or if he has a female in his life, a family member, a sister, a cousin, an aunt, even his mother, he'll say, you know what? Here's what she said. Give me the female perspective on what she meant. Now, it all depends on the relationship. He may not go deeper with you to say, give me the meaning behind that. If you have a good relationship, he may say, tell me more. And if he says, tell me more, give him specific, concrete examples of how whatever happened made you feel or what might be missing. Because we need something to kind of put our arm around. Whoa, that's great. And then most importantly, it's all how you end and say, you know what? I just want to remind you that you are a good man. You are the father of my children, and I don't want to do life without you. And I believe we can get better together because I am your biggest cheerleader. So I'm only coming alongside you to say, babe, here's what we can do. And when a woman approaches a man from that angle, we like, oh, snap, we will find our inner Superman to say, you know what? She's not really tearing me down. She wants to make me better. I need to listen and I need to execute.
Man, I wish you could just go back and get married again. Like get a big redo. Get a redo. But that's the thing.
You know what's interesting? You know what? Distance gives perspective. And after going through what some would call the dark night of the soul, divorce, which is like death by a thousand cuts, when you are doing your work, and so I am doing my work and have been for a few years, I just have these epiphanies along the way to help other couples, other men, other women to say, here's what I learned the hard way. You don't have to repeat history. And Jessica, it comes back to attitude. It
Mhm.
comes back at the
It's
core
true. It's true.
attitude. My attitude was holding me back from being a better husband and a better father.
Yeah. I mean, it's like there's that Chuck Swindoll quote, and it says, life is 5% of what happens to you and 95% how you respond
I
to
believe
it.
that.
And it's
And I
really
love that quote.
true. You talk a lot about being believed in. I know you've had some managers at work that have really believed in you, and you that got this high school teacher. I'd love to hear about someone else who's really believed in you. And then I'd love to hear someone you're really believing in right now.
Hmm. So probably the person who's had the greatest impact on my life is my pastor, a gentleman named Dr. Mark Sharona. And when I met him 20 years ago, he said to me, "You weren't born to fit in; you were born to be brilliant." And when he said it, it just unlocked something in me because I thought I was average. And I said to him, "How can you say that to me? You're a white man." And he said, when he and his wife first got married, they adopted two young African American boys. And he said, "We told our boys what they could be instead of what they couldn't be." And he said, "You're stuck in your mind and your body thinking the pigmentation of your skin creates and shapes who you are. And I'm telling you, you were born to be brilliant." And that started me on a 7-year journey that changed my life because he was inviting me to a higher viewing point of how he saw me and invited me to rise to the occasion. So, what that has done for me today, I have a number of mentees around the world that I pour into free of charge. And I tell them, like my mentor told me, what they can be instead of what they can't be. Because I understand that language is the software of the mind. So if I'm going to pour into another individual, I have to upgrade my verbal software for them to really get at a gut level how I see them and what I believe in them. Because what I discovered, sometimes you just need somebody to believe in you until your belief kicks in and allows you to make that attitude adjustment and have a brilliant future.
What would you offer to me is, we have adopted a son as well. We have two biological kids and then one son who is of dark pigmentation from Rwanda, from
Godiva chocolate is
Africa.
what I would call it.
And what are some of those narratives there that you as a Black man would specifically speak into?
I think there are five. Number one is to see what's right about them, and though no one is perfect, when they are imperfect, that you come alongside, as I'm sure you and your husband already do, and give them the feedback that allows them to still be seen in mom and dad's eyes as a great human being. But oh, by the way, your future is unfolding and you got to deal with this because you want to be successful long term. That's number one. Number two, really give them a personal experience where you expose them to the world beyond just the world that looks like them. What I mean by that is when I'm exposed to a world outside of my ethnic group, it expands my worldview because what that does, it allows you to begin to see how you show up in the world and not be shaped by those that just look like you. So continue that personalized experience. Third thing, to really understand and inviting them to think about what problem have you been created to solve, and having that conversation early and often. One of the mistakes that I made with my kids is, like my parents, I said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Because that's what their parents said to them. What I recognize with Daniel and Madison, in a world of algorithms, artificial intelligence, automation, autonomous cars, the question is, what problem have you been created to solve? So doing that for them now gets them thinking, oh my goodness, I can solve a problem in a world. Number four, recognizing whoever has their ear has their life. Who are the people around them that speak into their self esteem, their self concept, their self belief, and just protecting what is uploaded into their mind drive and hard drive and having that ongoing conversation. What did you take away? Right. And then probably the fifth thing, and this is something that I believe, and I will go to my grave saying, how do we hug them with our words? Before he goes to bed, before they go to bed at night, how do we hug them with our words? So when they are now in the night season and their dreams and imaginations are stirring, they wake up with, Mom and Dad hugged me with their words, and I can start today with the right attitude because I am loved, I am valued, I am appreciated, and all of those things give them confidence in a world, in an America where they are marginalized in certain areas. They can now walk out with this fortified attitude to say, you know what? I am Godiva chocolate fine because my mama told me, my daddy told me, and they just believe it. And it literally, they begin to live from the inside out.
I just loved where all of that went. It went in so many unexpected places. I have just had a radical commitment lately to my time in solitude. And for me, that's time with God, but it's different than how sort of my quote unquote quiet time looked like way back in the 90s. I really just spend time becoming aware of God's presence with me and really just get still and get quiet. I'm even leaving my phone at home and I'm having my solitude time under a tree in my car because literally I can't then think of other things that I have to get up and go do. It's really transforming me. It's what I need right now. And I love some of these questions that he left us with. Where have I been? Why am I here? What can I do? And where am I going? Sometimes I get a little freaked out, honestly, when I think it's because I'm an Enneagram 7 and like having to commit to any of these answers feels like I'm boxing myself in. But I am choosing a new attitude and I am going to answer some of these questions for this new season that we are in right now. And I challenge you to do the same. Spend some time in solitude this week. Would you do that for me? Spend a little time in solitude and ask yourself these questions. See where it might lead you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for sharing the show. Thanks for reviewing the show. Our wonderful music is by my good friend Ellie Holcomb. Going Scared is produced by Eddie Kofoltz. And I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.